So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you guys who are tuning in from various parts of the world, as you would see. This is the Software Testing Reimagined series. This is the second Fireside Chat. We have already done one Fireside Chat and one webinar, and we are also going to do one more Fireside Chat in the future. So, really happy to kick off this event. And now, the topic for today is the journey to testing maturity and how to scale your QA ops. This is one of the biggest asked topic for BrowserStack, and would love to share insights from a varied panel which we have today. Before we start off the session, there's some housekeeping items where we want to make sure to restrict the session to 60 minutes, and we'll record the session primarily because we want to also share the recording post the session so you can share it with your teams who were not able to participate today. And we want to make sure that today's Fireside Chat is super exciting. So we'll make sure that you guys are muted. In the end, we have also kept 10 minutes to make sure that you can ask direct questions to the panel. So that's the housekeeping items. Now, before I kick off this panel and give the host the chance to start the panel discussion, just a quick background about BrowserStack. So BrowserStack, as you all know, is the world's leading software testing platform. And a bit of journey about BrowserStack. So two of our co-founders, Ritesh and Nakul, they started BrowserStack in 2011. It is funny that they had started the problem, like they faced the problems themselves in their previous organization, and they wanted to solve the problem as a developer themselves. So they just started kick off the problem, and in the next 6 months, they were able to garner 1,000 customers. So that was the depth of the developer problem which they faced. And as you can see, we have been able to scale from there to around 1,000 plus employees today. We have 4 global offices across the world, and it's just been 11 years. It's day one for us still. A bit of background about the varied lines of products which we have. So we cater to web testing and mobile application testing. In web testing, we have our manual testing product called as Live, which helps manual testers test their devices and desktops. We have automate for testing using Selenium across parallel thousands of devices. And for visual testing, we have Perceive. On the app side, similar to web testing, you can test your apps across using App Live and App Automate. And we do believe in giving back to the community, and that is why there is 3 tools across screenshots and responsive, and the latest addition towards it is SpeedLab towards performance testing. As I was mentioning, it's just been 11 years, but the scale of the organization is that we have 6 million registered users. This number keeps changing for us. And we are able to run 72 billion Selenium commands on our data centers per year. As the poll, you could have observed that people are joining in from various parts of the world. Similarly, like we have customers across 135 countries and 16 globally distributed data centers. We have one of the best marquee industry customers across media, retail, BFSI. It's a varied lot. And as you can see, best of the best, I have used BrowserStack. Now that is done, we know about BrowserStack. I would want to kick off the session by introducing the moderator for today. Now he's David Burns. He's the head of open source for BrowserStack. But think of it like this: he has written multiple books. He is the one of the core contributors for Selenium, and I could have not thought of anyone else who could moderate such a huge panel which is sitting with us. So over to you, David. I think you can take it. Yes.
Thank you, Naveen. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Fireside Chat. I'm very excited about talking to this. I think we have, honestly, top-notch members to talk to. I get very excited by these things, and I try to see if we can get people who I just want to have a chat with generally. And so we've got some really good speakers, and we're going to go through kind of talking about the, what is a mature QA organization? How is that an enabler in a like growing company, and from startup even through to large enterprises, and go through all the different challenges that come up with that, like, because we've all been there in one way or another. And so like we need to figure out what we need to do, like prioritize, deprioritize, move on from that. So with that, we've got some really fantastic panelists. We have Jan, who's VP at Q2. So I'll let her introduce herself.
All right, thanks, David. Hello, everyone. My name is Jan Acosta. I'm based in Austin, Texas. And like David said, I'm the VP of Engineering here at Q2. I have 11 teams in my org who fall all across the maturity spectrum in terms of test automation. I started in testing last century. I will not tell you how far back. And even though I'm in a leadership role now, I still have a tester's heart. And so this is a topic that's very near and dear to me, and I'm excited to be here today. So thank you.
Brilliant. We have Maaret. Maaret, would you like to introduce yourself? I'm sure everyone knows you anyway.
Well, I'm sure not everyone knows me. I work for Vaisala. I wrote a lot of different words there on the slide, but basically, whenever we talk about things in scale, the scale is quite significant. There's different kinds of testing. It's not just software and systems. We're doing embedded software, and it's a lot of different teams. And since I'm not I'm not in a particular reporting structure. I'm kind of like a free agent moving around the organization. I can't calculate exactly how many teams, but the latest product that we created had 34 teams contributing to it. And that was just a small part of the organization that contributed. So the scale is quite much bigger than what I'm used to in my past. 25 years in testing.
Wow, impressive. Next, we have Sowmya. Sowmya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. So I'm Sowmya. I work for a company called Lito based out of Amsterdam. So our development team size is somewhere around 80, and it's spread across Netherlands and US. We are predominantly digital SaaS, serving creative minds. So when it comes to our testing style, it's since our architecture is mostly microservices based, so we pretty much cover the entire spectrum. So yeah, and the challenges for us rest mostly on the microservices side, in fact, and much less towards the UI, because we have more mature way of handling stuff when it comes to the UI web components. But yeah, when it comes to test automation maturity, let's say we are just catching up.
Brilliant. And finally, a colleague of mine, Anand, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, David, and thanks to the panel as well. I would we welcome this session. So I'm Anand. I run product at BrowserStack. In my prior lives, I've run engineering. I've run engineering and quality. And I look forward to this discussion and sharing my experience and learning from the panel and everybody on the Fireside Chat. It's a great topic, and we have a fantastic moderator in David. So let's just get going.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Before we get into it, I'm going to kind of start from because like with everything, it's always good to kind of start from a base and work from there. Before you can get into being successfully growing your organization and your maturity, I'm gonna, let's see, who should I pick on? I think I'm gonna pick on Anand and Jan, if that's all right. Can you share some of your challenges that you've kind of had in the past and how you've managed to kind of start pulling them through, being able to kind of grow, making testing important? So if we start with Jan and then move on to Anand.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So I think one of the biggest challenges I've seen, not only in the org that I'm in now, but in my previous lives, is when you have an organization that treats automation as a nice to have instead of a must have. You know, oh, we're going to get all of our tickets done this sprint, and we're probably going to have like at least 4 days left over. And with those 4 days, we're going to automate, you know, 1 trillion test cases, and it's going to be just great. Because y'all know it doesn't work like that. You know, the stories run long, bugs are found, and you get to the end, and if there's not a focused, dedicated, carved out, we will not touch it effort for automation, it doesn't happen. And so it can be hard to get that momentum and get kind of over the hill if you aren't, you know, super, I don't know the right word, focused or maniacal maybe about making that capacity available.
That's a brilliant answer. And then do you have more to add to that, or like a different insight?
I think Jan covered it, right? I mean, I've run a QA team in a banking industry before, right? And you could see that. I mean, every time you have to add a new product, be it a lending product, a deposit product, the amount of testing that goes in, because you just cannot have customers fail with it, right? And the cost of testing itself was around 40% of my entire engineering team. It's prohibitive, right? I mean, it just tells you why automation is so key, why automation is so critical. And you got to do it, the maniacal focus that Jan mentioned is absolutely right? Just got to do it. It's going to take, it's a long, hard yards, but it pays dividends over years, right? I mean, but you got to do it. It's an incremental process, just takes time. So
yeah,
my only advice, a game of inches, right? Don't think you're going to get a huge thing done overnight. Never going to happen, right? That's my only advice to everybody.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? So it's kind of like, it's about focusing on this quarter mile, that next quarter mile, and then eventually you've done your 26 miles or 42 kilometers, right? Like it's something that you kind of have to slowly build through. And actually, this leads perfectly, I think, into one of my favorite sayings by Maaret. It was kind of like you do automation to give you space to do manual testing, to give you space to do automation, and to go into this nice cycle. And sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose some. Like Maaret and Sowmya, could you, like, in that sense, like, could you, how do you quantify in terms of productivity or things like that, like of trying to improve through automation and kind of prevent some of those key problems, but also giving yourself that breathing space? Maaret, you want to go first?
I'll go first. Yeah, I'll go first. So in the last 15 years, when the first 4 years naturally was the learning phase, but from after that, when the automation was something that was picking up in the market, we have used various formulas, different lens to try and see what works best. And absolutely, there is no one particular solution, of course, right? So, but something that has worked for me across teams, across companies is the new feature testers or someone who's a part of testing the sprint activities aren't involved too deep into the automation, but mostly it was first ensuring that the feature is developed and it's usable, all aspects has been covered, and then covering only the positive scenarios as a part of the code or the testing. And then we had a center of excellence like a regression team who would actually cover the entire base. Of course, when I say entire base, it's not 100%, but a logical derivation of scenarios that will be pulled out and then added, be it positive or the negative scenarios. And this is good where the iron triangle is no more iron triangle, but you still have a stretching and slowly heading towards a golden triangle where you can add in resources, you can buy in the products that you want for the implementation. But this has worked consistently across teams that I have seen. So.
Yeah, no, good. Sorry, Maaret.
I feel like I'm coming to this from a very different angle. First of all, I just got through just before this summer vacation timeframe started, I just got through an organizational change where we no longer have a QA team. There's no QA team. I have no idea how I would say that 40% of our efforts go into testing, because coding and testing are basically unrecognizable. You don't have a specific person doing a specific job. It's just a job that gets done in the teams. There are people with a testing specialty, and they kind of, evolve teams towards this whole team idea of we are all part of this. And it really depends, kind of varies from team to team on how much of it is done by so-called specialists. Is it kind of like a service within that team, that there are team members who specialize? Or is it more like everyone pitches in some bits and pieces, and then there's reviewing of whatever you have? And I don't really talk about manual versus automation. What I talk about is that you can't actually separate them, because you're thinking, it's kind of manual when you think about what kind of things would you like to have information on. And when you document that in automation, it just supports, refreshing the results. And when you have something failing, it's kind of like a way of saying, kind of come here and look at this again. And that's a very manual activity. So there's no manual and automated, there is just testing. But then again, I'm also looking at it from a perspective of an organization where automation is a given. We no longer hire manual testers as such. We hire people who do both.
Yep. Yeah. I can see both sides of that coin. I've always come from the automation side, but I don't think it takes away anything that I've seen from my I don't even like the word manual tester, but kind of the other side of the coin of testers, right? Like they had a different view on these things, and that kind of I'm going to just pull Anand into this, because like Anand, your product, you do a lot of product thing, you speak to customers. Like how do you see people trying to balance both the manual and the automation side of things, like using BrowserStack's products?
Sure, I think two things, right? I mean, conceptually, I do agree with Maaret that testing is testing, but at the end of the day, there are manual testers and there is automation, right? I mean, that's life, right? That's always going to continue for a very long time. From our perspective, when you talk to customers, right, what we really want to provide is the fastest, most efficient way for customers to scale up both their manual testing infrastructure and their automation testing infrastructure, right? And that's really what BrowserStack stands for, right? We want to be the fastest, easiest, most efficient manner, right? We want to outperform local. We want to outperform local on speed, on cost, on variety, right? Which is fragmentation. So you want to test your mobile app, either automated or manual. We provide the widest array, the grid of devices or browsers, right? That's for a website itself, right? And that's really what we want to be. We want to be the infrastructure of choice for testers, be it manual or automated. And we talk to customers, people move to the cloud for every one of the business critical applications. And what we are seeing is testing is also moved to the cloud for the same reasons, right? It's just a better way of consuming testing. So, and that's really what we see customers look forward. At the same time, they hold us accountable, right? They want to ensure that tests are not flaky. They want to ensure that it is highly reliable and it scales well, right? And these are things that we got to do to make our customers happy.
Cool. No, thank you. Thank you for that insight. So the next thing I'm going to bring up is something that we've been working on at BrowserStack, which is this, because we've been doing a bunch of research into how a lot of our customers do it, trying to get some insights, because like from a product point of view, and we've interviewed lots of customers, studied their data, and tried to put them into buckets. But with these things, the buckets are kind of very porous. People kind of move in and out, especially as Jan was saying earlier, like some teams are at certain points, and we've come up with this kind of maturity model. And so there's a white paper that we'll be sharing, and it talks about like how teams do it, how they can impact businesses, and we'll, like I say, we'll send it over. And so I'm hoping one of my colleagues will be able to just share the image in a minute. And I'll kind of lead into the next question. But I kind of would like to get an understanding of from you, Jan, just because you mentioned it earlier, like where do you find you are, or kind of where your teams are, and how do you differentiate in kind of this maturity curve? And as I said, it's kind of porous, so no one's ever fixed into one place.
Yeah, well, and it's funny that you say that, David, because even within my organization, my teams fall across the spectrum. And these are folks that are working on very interrelated products that belong, in the same family. So I'll quickly highlight a couple. One that's kind of pretty far on the left and one that's pretty far on the right. So my most mature team has gotten to the point where they have a fully integrated pipeline, where every time a PR goes up, then there's a watcher, right? And it knows, aha, there's new code. We should be curious about that. And it will kick off the job that does the build. Once the build is complete, if the health check comes up, then it kicks off the automation. Once the automation run is complete, it writes it out to 4 different places and sends you an email. So everybody, and it's all hands-free. Everything is brilliant. And so that has freed that group up to then talk about, well, what's the next problem we want to solve? For us, it's NFR testing, and specifically NFR automation, because now we've got, the functional testing down. Let's take it to the next level. I also have teams that are on the other end of the spectrum where, it's still very much, automation is a nice to have still. Some of that's a capacity issue. We're working on it. And it's also a skill set issue. And so the folks that are kind of on the right hand side do weekly office hours, where some of the teams that are more to the left and the middle can come and, get mentoring, get coaching, help, oh, you're stuck on that. Well, have you thought about doing it this way, kind of stuff? Because then it collectively moves us forward. I hope that wasn't too long.
No, I think that was brilliant. Anand, did you want to add anything to what Jan has said? Because, like, again, your experience is so extensive.
I think she covered it all, right? But so I think it's not much to add. But I mean, the different organizations, for various reasons, will decide to stay in a pillar or the other, right? And different groups within companies will do that as well. I mean, there are good reasons for it, right? So while I was running banking at Finastra, I think for a digital banking unit, we would want to go into mature automation because it's a perfectly good reason. It's business critical, mission critical, and so on, right? But then again, there are some other areas where we would just be happy with the intermediate automation. And there are some that are non-production critical, could be a standalone siloed application. But we would just stay on manual. The effort of going to automation was just not worth the return, right? So I think you have to have a business case for it, right? And the business case is predicated by a lot of things, right? One is the availability of talent pool, which is very important driver. But again, that's also a very important driver is, do you really need to do it, right? Sometimes if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? I mean, it's you got to make some conscious choices around these journeys for where you would like to be on the maturity curve itself, right? Not every box is for everyone. That's the only piece I would like to make, David.
Yeah, no, that's very good. And like, yeah, there's when I look back at my career, which there are like, I started in banking. I didn't enjoy it, but like they're working on AS400s. The idea of automation was like, it was a pipe dream. Like it wasn't, it was just incredibly hard in those days. And I'm talking like nearly 20 years ago. So like, yes, everything does fit into that. So thank you. But like, what are the kind of the general best practices that your team, like you've kind of said, Jan, like they're kind of going to this very hands-off thing, like, but saying going hands-off sounds very easy, but like, what are the kind of the best practices that they've applied that have allowed them to actually get to that hands-off?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I will tell y'all, it was not easy. It took years and it was painful. And it's something that a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, probably lots of blood, sweat, and tears went into. I think a couple of the things that we did that helped us get there is to have dedicated SDETs for each of our Scrum teams. So that there was, someone who wore that hat and said, hey, this is my job. I am a specialist, and my job is to, look at what's in this sprint, look at what's in the backlog, look at the technical debt that we've acquired, and focus on it from an automation perspective, right? Automation will give you test efficiency, but test effectiveness has to come first, right? You have to have good tests. And then from there, you can move on to test automation, which drives efficiency gain, because then you do have the free hands to do other things. So having dedicated capacity was huge. And it was a cultural change, I think, probably more than technical, right? We've got some really smart people. And they're capable of doing amazing things, but making that cultural shift to say, this isn't an afterthought, but this is a must have. That was pretty key for us as well.
Sowmya, do you want to add anything? Because like you manage a group of SDETs, right? Like, so it seems like SDETs is generally the idea. And so for people who are listening and not sure of the terminology, it's a software developer engineer in test. So they write code to test stuff, not necessarily focusing on features. But Sowmya, did you have anything to add to what Jan said?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we kind of followed something that's similar, that we have subject matter expertise, like we have SDETs who specifically take care of the pipelines and all the QA ops relevant stuff. I wouldn't naturally remove the automation right away from the new features testers. Like, I'm also partially towards Maaret's idea that there's no difference between the manual or the automation, but for me, it's about the depth of the test that's added by the new feature tester who was part of the sprint. There's a lot on their plate to cover: accessibility, usability, security, sometimes API tests, functional tests. So it can get a lot and it can be overwhelming. So they do participate in automation testing or adding automated scripts. It's too hot here. Yeah, please bear with me. Yeah, adding some automated tests. But we have dedicated SDETs, like Jan mentioned, and who dig in more detail, adding more relevant tests and improving the spectrum, and also maintaining the build pipelines. So we have kind of found our breakpoint of how we can manage both within the team.
Okay, that's brilliant. And I've kind of, this is my favorite topic, so I'm a bit giddy, so I'm going to try to get everyone into this type of thing. And so, like Maaret, like you said earlier, you're working with people who are embedded. You've got people doing like from embedded all the way to everything else that kind of fits into software development. Can you share any insights about how you've helped scale that type of testing, right? Like just the idea of testing, how you've been able to scale it up because like you said earlier, you had 34 teams working on one product, right? So that's a feat in itself, right? How do you scale up to that?
Teaching people to be good neighbors to other teams. So a lot of the stuff that needs to actually happen in testing is not the stuff that needs to happen within the team, but it needs to happen with the interfacing team. And it's very common for teams to expect that it's the other one who will do it. So kind of having rules around whoever made the latest change is responsible for system testing. You can always ask your neighbor to join in, and you will, self-organize to collaborate with the neighboring team. That's one thing. And the other part is having some people like myself who show the omissions, like things that we missed, which is actually quite a big chunk in all of this. Everyone is happy to do something and fix something when they see that there is something that we missed. And a lot of times we live with the illusion that we didn't miss anything. And that's the critical part that we need to introduce. So kind of like building neighborhoods where you know who is living next to you, you talk to them, you create this kind of like a network of collaborative teams that are not just isolated, but it doesn't still mean that you have to have a regular scheduled meeting, official meeting. It's just that you need someone from that team who goes and has that cup of Coke or whatever that is that you drink on a regular basis with someone else in that other team. And I find that in these informal networks, actually, they are not very informal. It's really good when you have developer talking to a developer, tester talking to a tester, and manager talking to a manager. And every now and then you also mix these up. And within your own team, you're of course always mixing these up. So it's the communication networks that you need to build.
Jan, you had a really wry smile on your face while Maaret was talking there. Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. So, one of the things that a subset of my teams do every other Monday is what I call block party. And it's really a scrum of scrums, but we started it during COVID because before COVID, the majority of our teams were in the building in the same floor. And you didn't have to have that kind of coordinated collaboration and communication, but post-COVID, we're in a very different world now. That's probably the understatement of the century. And so I started this block party because I was like, the neighbors need to come out of the houses. The neighbors need to come. You can stand at a safe distance in the street, right? And don't get run over. But there was this need just to understand what the others were doing. And because they'll say, oh, well, I've been struggling with this, whatever. But if nobody knows that, then like, don't sit on it for, like, come and enjoy and like come outside and, have a cup of tea and some potato salad or I don't know, whatever you like at your block party and share. And I think that is so critical to helping everybody, and whether it's automation or not, just helping everybody improve.
Yeah.
Pro neighbors.
No, I like that. It's always one of the key problems when especially as a company scales, right? Like any organization scales, like there seems to be this inverse of like a company scales, communication drops, no matter what, right? I've been at two companies before which have scaled massively, and it's always the first thing I see, and it's like, okay, I also have no idea how to solve it, but now I like the idea of a block party. It's one of those kind of simple enough that I think it would just catch on with a lot of people. Brilliant. And so I've just lost my place. There we are. Sowmya, like, because you've been talking about this, and Jan, I'm going to pick on you again. Sorry. Kind of like, how have you been? How has kind of working with BrowserStack allowed you to kind of do that scaling up and to kind of handle that type of automation that kind of frees you up for other parts of your teams to handle different parts of testing? Start with you, Sowmya.
So in our case, because it's a digital SaaS company where I said we'll be serving the creative minds, most part of our application communicates with external applications like Adobe or WordPress and applications like that. No matter what it is, we still don't have a tool which can cross communicate between an external application, especially if they are on-prem, like if it's installed on a desktop install. So we know very well that at least 10 to 15% should be reserved and cannot be done in automation. And whenever this plugins test used to happen, then it is dependent on the OS, it's dependent on the browser, it's dependent on the browser version. It's kind of like interoperability. The testing was kind of also challenging, was getting challenging for us, because every time if we had to reproduce a bug or an issue, we have to ask the respective team member to either go with specific set of tech stack. I know it's crazy. So BrowserStack has helped us to test this in any combination of this OS with the browser and the version of the browser, checking if our application is interacting well with the other application that we are trying to do, be it high pixel density ratio images, or it can be the speed in which the assets to be loaded, or it can be video assets, things like that. So BrowserStack has been an enabler in achieving this, and completely eliminated the need to set up something in your local machine to have an error-free environment, and just a matter of minutes to just log in and then try to get it done. And likewise, when it comes to the automation, for us, it's not really the spread of browsers for the completion, but it's mostly about, again, interoperability, the versions of the higher to the lower. And for us, the customer base, mostly like 77% is on Chrome. So most part of testing goes on Chrome with 16% on Safari, and I guess like 4% on Firefox. So our major testing is on Chrome. So all the Prio 1 tests run specifically on Chrome, and then the Prio 2 and 3 are spread across Firefox and the Safari. So it has helped us the way we structure and approach the solution, achieving the coverage. And we also know when it fails, what should be approached first and what should be the next. This has helped us scale better, both manually as well as in automation.
Jan, did you have anything to add there? You're nodding feverishly. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my teams work on online banking software. So, David, both you and Anand have mentioned the banking industry. Rule number one is you don't mess with people's money. They get really mad, really mad. And so that's why we have to set the bar very, very high for quality. If you look at the statistics, approximately, and this is for the US. I apologize to those of you that are outside the US. I have no idea what the stats are for y'all, but for us and for our customers, approximately 80% of all logins to online banking are on a phone these days, right? You may very well sit down and open up a browser and log into your financial institution to see, did your paycheck get deposited? Did your electric bill get paid? Do you have enough money to go buy a fan because it's really hot outside, et cetera, et cetera. But 80% of the time people are doing things on their phone, and COVID is part of what drove that number up. It was really high before COVID, but post-COVID, people aren't going into branches of their local credit union or their bank, right? Especially in the beginning. Someone told me it was BC before COVID, and I guess AC after COVID. Because people were in quarantine, financial institutions were doing by appointment only. And so that rapidly pushed, the numbers higher. And for us and our digital banking platform, we support, X number of versions of iOS, a number of versions of Android versus the versions of our platform versus tablets versus phones. When you start to do the combinatorics on it, it's overwhelming. And so with everyone working from home, having a cabinet, because we have a device cabinet, having a cabinet full of mobile devices wasn't practical. right? Because people weren't in the office and they didn't want to touch phones that other people had been breathing on. And maybe they moved to other places in the midst of the last 2.5 years. And so we have to have a way to test. I mean, we test browsers too, but from a mobile perspective, that's where BrowserStack is kind of our sweet spot, because it allows us to get the coverage we need in a much more simple, comprehensive, and reliable way. Because what we're doing, it impacts families, right? They need to be able to buy food and ice, whatever else. So that's where it's been a big help to us. And I don't have to keep up with the spreadsheet of who took the good iPad. So
yeah. Well, past career, I worked on Firefox OS, and the idea was that a lot of people, their first access to the internet and this was nearly 10 years ago, would be on a mobile phone. And so everything you've said just resonates with what I've seen in the past and what I've seen in the future. And so kind of leading into that, to the people listening out there, there's going to be a poll that's going to pop up, and it's just going to ask you a simple question about kind of if you would like to explore things with BrowserStack. And so it should just pop up. If you could just give your answer, that would be awesome. Great. And so leading on to that, I'm gonna try to pull the questions more away from automation, but to the idea of kind of how QA is and how people partner with QA. And so this one I'm just going to direct at you, Sowmya, and then how is QA perceived in your organization? Because you have a dedicated SDET team, but how is it kind of generally perceived, and where was it and where is it going? Like the direction of that type of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I'm absolutely proud actually to mention about my present team. They manage everything within the team. I've not seen this in the past. I've been in all types of teams before where QAs are looked down, manual testing is looked down, and so many times, like even when I was doing an active testing, testers weren't informed of any hot fixes or changes that was going into the production. It was just done. And if approached for technical details, I don't feel you may need it. So I've received all types of feedback, but my present team, it's an absolute gem. They kind of share the testing activity within themselves. So they do peer developer tests, and then they also do pair testing with the testers, and then they collaborate with the wider team, maybe CX, which was a customer success team, or the product management team, to gain more customer perspective if they have implemented very well advanced in before the review meeting itself. But in spite of all these, we still have dedicated testers who can just apply a little more logic, dig more deeper, and come up with more scenarios. And also it involves layers of tests. Most of these tests, what we are trying to draw within as a form of pair testing, it's happening at the UI level. But when we hit the different layers, the onion structures of a testing, then we need support from a dedicated person. So that's why we have SMEs, and then we have specialty testers, if I can say, who can spend time to do more or apply more cognitive skills in the applications, what they're doing, and the features can just shine through when it's deployed to the production.
Brilliant. I kind of feel I've not spoken to Anand for a while, so I'm going to direct this purely at you, and it's a nice. I think this is a good one for you, Anand. What generally have you seen as kind of blockers or distractions to teams or organizations as they try kind of become more mature on their journey? Like, what are the general things that people get hung up on that possibly they shouldn't?
I think, sorry, Maaret, do you want to go first?
No, just go ahead.
Okay, sure. See, I think as I've seen it, there are lots of reasons that people get hung up. And I think I always like to start with people, process, and then technology in that order, right? When people, a new person comes in, automation is the mantra. They just go in all in on automation, right? And they try and move the organization very quickly when its capability and maturity is just not there, right? And that's one flag that I would like to raise, that I've seen that journey fail quite a few times, right? And that's because you got to bring the organization along on that journey. You got to bring the teams along on that automation journey. You got to get that maturity up the curve. That's, I think, one of the most important pieces. And don't expect results to come in overnight, right? And that's never, especially any complex business application, you're never going to have 100% automation. Just not possible, right? There is always going to be new stuff, new use cases, and there's always going to be stuff that's going to be automate plus manual use case, right? So that's a very important piece. So things like going up the wrong metric, for example, I've got 95% automation. I mean, that metric actually changes every day because the more code you add, the more use cases you add. And so your metric keeps slipping by the day. I mean, it's a very interesting thing, right? So and these are kind of pitfalls that I would kind of watch out for people, right? Don't get stuck on a few of these things. The second piece is you got to bring people along. In with the larger organizations, your people used to manual testing for years, sometimes decades, to get them to embrace this new thing, to get them to train, to get them to learn, right? It does take time. So I think there's just some of those things that you got to factor in as you move through a maturity journey, right? And finally, I think you got to look at the cost benefit analysis. For some areas of software, maybe it's just not worth it. Yeah. And so let's just accept it. That's your attic in your house with stuff, right? I mean, you're not going to clean it. It's just the return on cleaning it is just not worth it, right? You're going to get stuck with it. So I think there are a few of these pieces that you have to watch out as any organization goes through a maturity curve. And only start with the newest code. That's always makes sense. So that's really how I would put it. David?
Okay. And like the next thing that generally pops into my mind, because like I think generally you're correct with what you've said there, but like everything that we need to do nowadays needs to be measurable in some sense. So kind of like, what are key like KPIs, key performance indicators that people should focus on or be aware of, or kind of just throw out because those are useless? Like with people start, like I know you said about like, oh, we're 95% automated, but are there any others that you've got?
Yeah, I mean, I think a few things, right? I look at always as both your leading and lagging indicators, right? Finally, end of the day, lagging indicators in the quality business makes the most sense. So your customer's most happy, right? And there are multiple methods of checking that, bugs logged by customers and so on and so forth, right? You can just go there, right? That's an important piece. Equally, it's your velocity of release, right? I mean, automation done right can really get you to a very high velocity of release itself, and that itself leads to productivity gains and so on. So I think there are a few of those lagging indicators because these things take a little longer, right? From a leading indicator perspective, I think it's a little more nuanced, right? And if you're in a mature automation org, I think things like test cases automated, how many builds are broken, all of those things start making more and more sense, right? And they tell you how you will perform going forward. For an organization just embracing that curve, I think the leading indicator is a little hard to come by, right? You just have to go by raw numbers to say, how much have you done? Are you able to cover the test? Is your test coverage improving because of automation, right? That's something that I would look forward to. Right? I mean, because I would still have a body of testers. If I can automate, I'll probably get 10x velocity at one end. That doesn't mean that my palette that I'm going to go out and look at, does it suddenly expand, right? And I think that coverage palette is another metric that I would really like to focus on much more. especially in a younger maturity organization.
Right, that's really good, and it kind of it's a nice segue for me. We're going to just put up a quick Slido questionnaire for people to answer, which is just kind of what percentage of do you feel your test cases are automated? And some of these things are like, if you understand maths, or it's really, really hard to measure, but like where do you think you are? You can use the QR code, or you can go to slido.com and use scaling the QA. Details are on the left there. And I'm going to leave that up. And hopefully some people will start answering that as soon as possible. And so like, as these numbers move about, because like it's very hard to measure some of these things, as you said, and some of them are leading and lagging indicators. This one's for kind of Maaret, maybe, like because you're very good at pulling people in and having these informal chats. Like, how do you help QA partner more effectively with development and product teams to get that success, be it kind of all manual, be it all automation, or ideally somewhere in between, because like putting all your eggs in one basket is not perfect.
I tend to frame this around learning together in ensembles. So I take either a couple of people from each of the teams and put together neighbors who are then testing together in a single session, kind of like as a shared mind, we are together testing a thing we just co-created. We might be creating automation, we might not leave any automation behind. It really depends on the day, but bringing those people together to find the things they don't know that they don't know, that's kind of my go-to thing. And sometimes they learn that they don't have a good collaboration and they don't understand what the other team is doing. Sometimes they learn that they're actually really well in sync, but they need to realize some of that themselves. I also do a lot of questionnaires, kind of like I ask, kind of, you know, you have these 12 different main areas of practices that I keep asking from teams, this one. And then they vote kind of like, how happy are they on their own, you know, not percentages, but how happy are they with the level that they're right now? Like, do they recognize there's something to improve or a lot to improve? That's kind of like a wider scale. And then just showing that one person or maybe half of the team thinks that the collaboration doesn't work and the other half thinks it's brilliant, everything works so great. Like, you don't even have to talk about why it's that way, but they when they realize there is a problem, they start reacting to it. So visualizing, sharing experiences, that's kind of my go-to way of doing it. And you can do quite a lot of that in scale when you have someone who goes around and does it with different people, and is just able to kind of put things together with the various teams.
I think that's brilliant. I
But
generally,
for me, like, I just wanted to mention, like, I'm really cringing here on the percentages. I think we have really great teams in automation, and I would say they have at most 20% of testing automated. So I don't think we have a common way of saying, what is this percentage automated? You're thinking in terms of what would I document and manually test after. I would maybe do 10% of the things that I originally explored into repetitive tests ever in any case. And then talking about what percentage of that is automated, it feels a little weird that we're kind of still stuck in that conversation. And I feel like we should move away from that a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's kind of probably a Dijkstra quote that we could probably fit into that. So believe it or not, we've flown through 55 minutes and we have a few questions. So I'm going to just dive into one or two of them. And I do apologize to everyone who's answered questions. I've actually got kind of lost track of time, enjoying actually having a chat with everyone. So let's see, I'm going to kind of direct this to Jan. What is your take on test case documentation, especially for kind of something like API tests? Do you think it's an overhead to maintain, or just what?
I think you have to do what's smart, which is probably kind of a lame answer, but it's the truth. For a lot of our scripts, they're a combination of UI and API. You know, so we may do a lot of test setup, test cleanup via the API because it's quicker and just a whole lot easier. And if there's something we're trying to test through the UI, you know, we'll do it that way for those steps. For pure API tests, I think it depends. I mean, part of me says documenting test cases is never a bad thing, but I wouldn't go to laborious efforts to do it just for the sake of documentation. So I guess the question is, if there's, you know, return on value, then yes. If it helps you understand, you know, what you're doing or what you're not, yes, but it all depends.
Hopefully that answers your question, Amit. I feel like it's a very good question, and as always, very good questions always answer with "it depends." And so I've got a question here from Sumava. I do apologize if I've kind of mispronounced that, but to Anand, like, how do you define maturity model fit for organizations? Like, how do we help people find where they think they are on the thing, rather than going, oh, sure, I'm on the end, but I'm not actually?
I think a very good question, right? And I think even within organizations, you'll find different teams at different levels of this maturity curve itself, right? So I think it's not just for an organization, but it's within an organization also. One is, I mean, you can have pretty much scales, right? Just say, like, for example, if I am a PayPal or a Facebook, I probably check in code 12 times a day. I probably run my tests as a part of that 12 to 15 times a day. I run regression builds on an hourly basis, if not more, right? And they tend to be highly advanced from an automation maturity in the maturity lifecycle itself, right? And I think you can start benchmarking yourself to organizations in all these four, right? Similar to Facebook, you can have other ones. I mean, for example, Jan in the banking example gave you one. Sowmya talked about how a little more manual and a little less automated in her examples. You can start benchmarking against 3 or 4 examples, right? And then see where you fit in today, but equivalently, what is your to-be state, right? And I think your to-be state is actually quite important. I mean, don't jump into it just because I want to be PayPal. I mean, many companies just cannot be PayPal or Facebook, right? You just cannot. And maybe you should not, right? I think that's an important piece. And I think the vast majority of companies will fall into buckets 1, 2, and 3. And that's what they want to be. And I think that introspection and benchmarking is what I would really like for companies to get to.
Cool. And this is going to be the final question, and I'm going to ask Maaret, because I think her answer around this is generally always good, because it's around testing. But and your previous answer, can automation replace manual testers ever in the future? Like, I think I know your answer, but I'm going to ask you it anyway.
Can AI nowadays generate some code for us? Yes. Can it do some code that is for testing purposes? Yes. Do we need still people to attend to that? Yes. Will we call them testers? Hopefully some of them, so that I don't have to quit this, because I hate being called anything other than tester in this field. So we will need smart thinking individuals. There will be organizations that want to call us with different names, and then either we survive with the different names and we do still the smart thinking work that we were always doing, or we'll find that gardening is our next passion. That might be also an option.
I love it. This is why I wanted to ask you it. because your insights is always brilliant. And that is time. Thank you so much to the guests for joining us. As always, I love doing these fireside chats. It's an amazing time to just chat. Everyone's insight and experience is always really, really good, and kind of even gets me to question some of the kind of biases I have. And I've been doing this for a while, and I try kind of be objective as possible. So thank you to all of you for joining me and talking with me today. One final thing, there's an upcoming event. We're going the next one in the series, which we'll be talking about taking a mobile first approach to testing. So there's a QR code that is up on your screen, so you can do it. It's on the 11th of August. And so I'll be hosting that with the guests that are on the screen there. So Nakul, Santosh, and Jinan, and getting their insights into the space. I think it's going to be brilliant. So please do sign up, and thank you to everyone for joining us today, and thank you to those who watch the recording later. I think hopefully you get some insights and learn from it, and it's been valuable. And again, thank you to Jan, Anand, Sowmya, and Maaret for taking the hour to come chat with me. It's been brilliant, and hopefully I know it's kind of warm in different parts of the world, so you manage to stay cool as much as possible. And we'll be speaking to you soon. Thank you, everyone.